My name is Danielle. I was 26 when my mother told me not to come to my grandmother's funeral. She said it without cruelty. That was what made it worse. She spoke like a woman confirming a delivery, not excluding her daughter from saying goodbye to the only person who had ever made her feel seen. "It's not necessary for you to be there," Mom said over the phone. Her tone was flat, final. "We've already made the arrangements." At first, I didn't panic. I thought maybe something had changed, the date, the venue, maybe even the ceremony itself. But then came the second blow. "It's just family, Danielle." Those three words landed like cold water to the face. Just family. And somehow, that no longer included me. I stood there in my small Denver apartment, half dressed in a black sheath I'd laid out the night before. My hands started trembling, my throat thickened. "Mom," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I am family." There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to sting. "She wouldn't have wanted the drama," my mother replied. That was it. No explanation, no room for discussion. Just the casual cruelty of being erased by someone who taught me how to write my own name. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't throw anything or beg for inclusion. I just hung up the phone and sat back on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror, a woman halfway into mourning and nowhere to go. For 2 hours, I didn't move. Outside, the traffic kept flowing. People lived their lives. I sat there in a frozen pocket of rejection, too stunned to unpack the weight pressing into my chest. And then I remembered the envelope. 2 weeks earlier, I had received something unusual in the mail. A plain white envelope, postmarked from a rural town in Oregon, no return address. I had nearly tossed it out, thinking it was junk. But the handwriting had stopped me. It was hers, Grandma Eleanor's script. Wobblier than it used to be, but still unmistakable. I dug through my desk drawer now, my movements shaky but determined. I found it buried beneath old bills and unopened catalogs. The envelope still carried a faint lavender scent. I hadn't realized until now how much that would matter. Inside, one short line in familiar ink. "If they don't let you in, come anyway. You'll know what to do." At the time, I hadn't known what it meant. Now it was the only thing keeping my feet on the ground. I folded the note, pressed it to my chest, and stood up. This wasn't over. The road to the church was narrower than I remembered. It wound through the hills outside Bend, Oregon, past overgrown orchards and moss-darkened fences. Grandma used to call it God's elbow, a sharp turn where the trees thinned just enough to let the light pour in. I hadn't been here in years. Not since college, not since the last real summer before the silences began. My rental car crunched onto the gravel lot just as a low fog began to settle. I parked at the far end, near the old wooden fence, where the trees cast long shadows over the vehicles lined up in rows. Black cars, navy coats, the same pressed collars and bowed heads I remembered from distant family reunions. No one saw me step out. I kept my coat buttoned, hair tied back, face bare. No mascara, no lipstick, just skin and silence. The funeral home stood ahead, white painted siding peeling in spots, windows fogged with breath and age. The wooden doors were propped open, spilling warm yellow light onto the steps like the last remnants of something sacred. Inside, I could hear the faint murmur of hushed voices, of coughs covered by handkerchiefs, of grief being spoken in socially acceptable tones. I paused at the bottom step, let the cold bite through the wool of my gloves, let the moment hang. Then I heard her voice, my mother's. "She didn't RSVP, she said to someone just inside the entryway. "I told you she wouldn't show up." She sounded tired, but not sad. Another voice followed. Male, my cousin Matthew probably. "Well, if she does, we'll handle it, quietly." Handle it like I was a logistical error, a stain to be wiped. I climbed the steps. Each footfall echoed sharp against the wood, like I wanted them to hear. Let them brace, let them think for half a second they could stop me. I crossed the threshold. Heads turned. Matthew saw me first. His expression froze, halfway between recognition and alarm. He looked over my shoulder as if expecting a security detail to trail behind me. Then came my mother. Her eyes didn't widen, her mouth didn't drop. There was no surprise, just a hardening, as though she'd rehearsed this moment in her head already. "You weren't invited," she said. "I didn't know grief came with a guest list," I replied. A couple standing near the guest book looked away awkwardly. Someone coughed. I kept my tone even, not angry, not shaky, just clear. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said. "I'm here because the woman who meant more to me than anyone else in this family is lying in a box 15 feet away." That shut Matthew up. My mother stepped forward, close enough to drop her voice to a hiss. You've made your point. Now leave, Danielle. Don't turn this into something ugly. For who? I asked. You? She didn't answer. She never did. I walked past her, brushed by Matthew's arm, entered the sanctuary like I belonged there, because I did. The room smelled of lilies and polished wood. Grandma's picture stood at the front, framed in gold and smiling beneath soft lighting. The pews were half full. I slid into the very back, where no one would have to decide whether to acknowledge me. No one followed, no one spoke, but no one asked me to leave either. The minister stepped up to the podium, his voice already smoothing into the script. He spoke of transitions, of journeys, of God's will. He didn't know her, not really, and I couldn't listen. Instead, I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket, unfolded the letter, read those same 10 words again and again. If they don't let you in, come anyway. You'll know what to do. I didn't know what to do, but I was here, and that was a start. The minister's voice faded into a distant drone, something about mercy and eternal rest, but I couldn't follow him. My eyes were locked on the letter in my lap. I'd read Grandma's 10 words so many times they felt etched into my skin. If they don't let you in, come anyway. You'll know what to do. But this time, as I carefully unfolded the creased paper again, something shifted. A faint crackle, a stiffness near the fold that hadn't been there before. I turned the envelope over. Not the letter itself, but the envelope. Tucked behind the flap, nearly flush with the seam, was a second slip of paper. It was smaller, thicker, heavier than it should have been for something forgotten. I slid it free. A card, her handwriting again. More rushed this time, uneven, as if she'd written it quickly, or secretly. One line, underlined twice. If they silence you, speak louder. My breath caught. This wasn't a metaphor anymore. This wasn't about family dinners or holiday invites. This was deliberate. She hadn't mailed this on a whim. She had meant for me to find it when I was already on the edge, when no one else would want me here. My hands tightened around the card. The flowers at the front of the church blurred, not from tears, but from the fire building behind my ribs. My grandmother didn't deal in riddles. She was practical, sharp. If she said, speak louder, then somewhere, something was waiting to be said. But what? I scanned the room from the shadows of the back pew. My mother sat 3 rows from the front, spine stiff, jaw tense. Her hands were folded in her lap, wedding band glinting under the overhead lights. She wasn't crying, not even pretending to. Next to her was my Aunt Barbara, who hadn't spoken to me since 2019, and Matthew already scrolling discreetly on his phone beneath the hymnal. A few cousins dotted the rows, their faces unfamiliar now, bloated by years and distance. But none of them looked surprised to see me here. They looked nervous. That was when I realized something. No one had reacted when I walked in. No whispering, no scrambling, no fake smiles. It was like they knew I would come, like they were waiting for me to show up. The back of my neck prickled. The minister's voice rose slightly, transitioning into some pre-scripted anecdote about Grandma's gardening, always with her gloves and sun hat, humming hymns while she planted tomatoes. Wrong. She never gardened. She was allergic to bees. That was Aunt Barbara. Grandma Eleanor preferred balconies and crossword puzzles. I almost laughed. This wasn't her funeral. Not really. This was a performance. A neatly framed, lavender-scented event with calla lilies and white programs. It had her name but not her memory, and yet she'd still found a way to reach me. I read the second card again. If they silence you, speak louder. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But I knew where I had to look. After the service, after the applause disguised as prayer, after the last white rose hit the floor. There was something left, something she'd left behind, for me. After the service, I didn't stay for the reception. I didn't fake smiles over lukewarm coffee, didn't accept the condolences of people who hadn't called me in years. I slipped out during the closing hymn, walked past the guest book, past the coats and perfume, and mumbled prayers. My mother didn't turn to look. She didn't have to. She knew I was leaving, and she probably assumed that was the end of it. But it wasn't. The drive to Grandma's house was only 12 minutes, but it felt longer. Like each turn pulled me deeper into something I hadn't named yet. I followed the same road we used to take after Sunday services, when she'd let me sit in the front seat and pick the radio station. I half expected to find the place locked, maybe even emptied out. But when I pulled up, the porch light was on, and the front door cracked open. I sat in the car for a moment, engine still running, eyes fixed on the sagging screen door as it nudged against the frame in the breeze. No car in the driveway, no sound inside. But the air shifted. I killed the ignition, stepped out slowly, gravel crunching beneath my boots. Every step forward made my pulse rise, not in fear, but in clarity. Something was wrong, but not in the way I thought. I pushed the door gently. It creaked open. The smell hit me first, lavender and dust, the scent of old wood and worn pages. Everything looked untouched. The floral couch still covered with its faded quilt, the bookshelf with its crooked stacks of puzzle books, the tray of reading glasses near the armchair. But something else lingered, a tension, like the house was holding its breath. I closed the door behind me and stood in the front hallway, listening. Silence. No movement, no voices. I walked to the kitchen, flipping on the light. The bulb flickered once before settling into a low yellow glow. Her teacup still hung on the rack. A half-used notepad sat near the window with a grocery list in her handwriting. Lemons, oat milk, batteries, normal things, everyday things. Except none of this was everyday anymore. I opened the drawer where she kept the letters I used to send her from college. Still there, neatly bundled in twine. I ran my fingers across the top one. It was postmarked from 4 years ago. I had forgotten what I wrote. Probably something about finals and loneliness and missing her cinnamon toast. Then I noticed something else. On the corner of the counter, barely visible beneath a placemat, sat a small brass key. Not hidden, not disguised, just waiting. I picked it up. It wasn't for the house. I knew that instantly. Too small, too delicate. Basement? No, that lock was old and rusted. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on the china cabinet, the one she never let anyone open. Just keepsakes, she used to say. Nothing worth dusting. I crossed the room and slid the cabinet door. Locked. Then I looked again. Not at the glass, but beneath it. A second lock, almost invisible, hidden under the wooden lip. I inserted the key. It clicked. The cabinet opened with a sigh. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a wooden box. No label, no note, just waiting. The box was heavier than it looked. I pulled it out slowly, the velvet wrap falling away in quiet folds. The wood was dark, almost black, with tiny brass hinges and no engravings. Nothing to suggest what it held or why it had been hidden behind a locked cabinet my entire life. I set it on the table, stared at it, my fingers hovered above the latch. This wasn't just a relic, it was intentional. My grandmother never hid anything without reason. Not birthday presents, not recipes, not secrets. And yet, here it was. A box no one had mentioned. A key she'd left out like a breadcrumb. I took a breath and opened it. Inside were papers, not old love letters or photographs, but forms, neatly folded, bound together with a dark blue ribbon. The top sheet was yellowing, creased in the middle. Legal documents, notarized. I recognized the format immediately. My job in a small claims office had trained my eyes to spot the structure. But these weren't about debts. They were transfers, declarations. The first one bore her name, Eleanor Rose Mitchell, dated almost 3 years ago. The second page had mine, Danielle Mitchell. The rest, names I didn't expect. But what struck me hardest wasn't the content. Not yet. It was the handwriting in the margins, my grandmother's. Small annotations, arrows, circles, notes that only someone close would understand. Beside one of the names, she'd written, "Not to be trusted. Do not speak of this until necessary." Another margin read, "If Danielle finds this, she'll know what it means. Tell her to be brave. Tell her it was always meant to be her." I read the sentence again and again. She knew I'd find it. She didn't just hope, she planned for it. The box wasn't an emergency stash. It was a message in plain sight, left where only I would ever think to look. Outside the window, the sky had deepened into dusk. The wind stirred the wind chimes she'd hung from the porch beams years ago. Hollow metal tones drifting into the kitchen. I scanned the next few pages. More forms, some I couldn't make sense of. Financial statements, handwritten notes, an envelope with someone else's name on it, sealed shut with wax, unopened, untouched. I didn't dare break it yet, not yet. My grandmother wasn't chaotic. Every step she'd taken, even in her final months, was deliberate, calculated. So this wasn't the end of something, it was the middle, a puzzle I'd entered too late and still had to finish. But I wasn't alone. She had left me a trail, and someone else had tried to erase it. The echo of my mother's voice returned, sharp as a blade. She wouldn't have wanted the drama. No, she would have hated what they were trying to do in her name. And now I wasn't just a granddaughter sneaking into a house she no longer had keys for. I was the only one who knew the truth wasn't buried with her body. It was still breathing. and someone was going to choke on it. The wind had picked up by the time I stepped back outside. The house stood quiet behind me, lights off now, door locked. The box, and everything inside it, was back in my coat, pressed flat against my ribs like armor. I didn't know where I was going at first, but my feet knew. Not to my car, not to a hotel, back to the funeral home. It made no sense. The service was long over. Everyone should have been gone. But something told me it wasn't finished. Something was still shifting under the surface. And I was done waiting for permission to dig. The building was dark when I pulled in. Only one overhead light still glowed above the double doors, casting long shadows across the walkway. But as I stepped out of the car, I saw it. A black sedan idling across the lot. Engine off, headlights dimmed, and someone sitting inside. I slowed my pace, heartbeat flattening into instinct. Kept walking like I hadn't noticed. Reached for the door, and stopped. It was unlocked, again. Inside, the reception hall was empty. The scent of flowers had dulled into something more sterile. Pine cleaner, carpet, the residue of grief. But as I passed the main room, a sound stopped me. Footsteps. I turned, not from the hallway. From the side room, the one with the family lounge, where guests went to breathe or hide or say things they couldn't voice in the sanctuary. The door creaked open. And there he was, James, my grandmother's attorney. He looked exactly the same. Same silver glasses, same immaculately pressed suit. The kind of man who never arrived late, never raised his voice, never spilled coffee on a file. I hadn't seen him since my early 20s, but the sight of him made something inside me lock up. He was holding a folder, not thick, just enough pages to be deliberate. He didn't flinch when he saw me. "Danielle," he said calmly, as if we were bumping into each other at the grocery store. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He looked at the folder, then back at me. "Returning something." "To who?" He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "You weren't supposed to be here," I said. "I was told you wouldn't attend," he replied, still level. "That you'd decline the service." "By who?" Another pause. Then, without meeting my eyes, he said, "Your mother." I stepped closer. "Did she tell you not to give me anything?" His silence was answer enough. I reached into my coat and pulled out the box. I didn't open it, just let him see it. His face changed. Not panic, resignation. "You found it," he said softly. "She wanted me to," I replied. "She left more than one message." He looked tired then. The kind of tired that doesn't come from age, but from knowing too much and saying too little for too long. "You need to come to my office," he said. "I'm not waiting anymore," I said. "What's in that folder?" His jaw flexed, but he didn't hide it. He handed it to me. Just like that. No fight, no delay, because he knew something I was only just starting to grasp. The lies weren't about the funeral. They were about everything after. The folder felt warm in my hands. Not from heat, but from weight. The kind of weight that comes with withheld truths. It was slim, stapled in the corner, stamped faintly with James's firm's logo in the corner. But the name on the top page was what made my fingers tighten. Eleanor Rose Mitchell. And below that, in clean typed lines, last will and testament revised. 14 months prior to her death, I sat down in one of the empty chairs by the reception table, the same ones that had held people whispering about casseroles and heaven only hours ago. I flipped the cover open. The first few paragraphs were standard. Identification, date, place of residence. Then came the distribution. I scanned quickly. My eyes leapt down the page, searching for names: Barbara, Matthew, a few cousins. Small gifts, jewelry, heirlooms, a book collection to a local library. Then, to my granddaughter, Danielle Mitchell, I leave the Cascade Shores cabin, all contents therein and full power of executorship regarding the administration and execution of this estate. I froze. My throat tightened, not just an inheritance. Executor. I flipped to the next page. Confirmation, witnesses, signatures. The notary stamp was clean, legally valid. I kept reading, scanning for discrepancies, searching for anything that might explain what I had been told, or rather, not told. Everything inside the box at the house pointed to this version of the will. So why had I been excluded from the service? Why had no one mentioned my name? I looked up at James, who stood quietly across the room, hands folded like a man who'd already spent the guilt. "Did they see this version?" I asked. He didn't blink. "They saw a different one." "A different one?" He nodded. "Your mother submitted an earlier copy," he said. one that names her and Barbara as co-executors. It predates this by almost 2 years. And you let her do that? I advised against it, he said plainly, but she had access. She filed first. My head spun. But you had this, I said. Why not speak up? His silence landed like a slap. He wasn't the villain, but he wasn't innocent either. She said you had cut contact, he said finally. That you'd rejected Eleanor's final months, that you wanted nothing. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a fury so white it felt cold. She lied, I whispered. He didn't respond. She didn't just lock me out of the funeral, she tried to erase me from history. I stood. I want every version, every copy, every witness statement. I'll get them to you by morning. No, I said. You'll get them to me now. He hesitated and then nodded. There's one more thing, he added. Your grandmother left a message, separate from the will, not a letter, a recording. I went still. Where is it? He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small flash drive. No label, just a red dot drawn in permanent marker on one side. She asked me not to play it unless you found the truth yourself. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I tucked it into my coat pocket beside the box and turned toward the door, because whatever came next wasn't about grief anymore. It was about proof. The lake road was darker than before. Night had settled across the trees like a thick quilt, muffling even the wind. My headlights cut through the shadows in narrow slices as I pulled up the gravel path toward the Cascade Shores cabin. Ours now, mine, according to the paper. But still pulsing with her memory, her laughter on the porch, her humming near the stove, the hush of her footsteps at dawn. I hadn't been back in years. The key turned easily in the lock. The cabin smelled like cedar and thyme, like somewhere no one had touched in too long, but everything still waited patiently. I didn't turn on every light, just one in the corner. Warm, quiet, the box came first, then the folder, then the flash drive. I sat at her old desk, the one by the window with the chipped brass lamp and stack of word puzzles still half-filled. My laptop, mine, was already waiting. I plugged in the drive. There was only one file. I clicked. For a moment, silence. Then her voice filled the room. Danielle, Pumpkin, if you're hearing this, it means I was right. And I'm sorry, I wish I could have done this in person. I stopped breathing. The audio wasn't perfect, a little scratchy, recorded from a phone or something older. But it was her, the cadence, the strength, even her smile was there, tucked between the syllables like it always was. I don't know what they've told you, she said. But if they've kept you out, if you had to find your way here alone, then you already know it wasn't by accident. Her voice paused, only briefly, then returned, softer now. I knew this might happen. That's why I changed the papers. That's why I made sure you'd find the key. Because some people in this family believe in control more than love. They think inheritance means power. I think it means trust. My eyes burned. I chose you for a reason, she continued. Not because you needed anything, but because you never asked. You gave, you listened, you stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. She cleared her throat. There was a rustle of fabric. Maybe she'd shifted in her seat, and then she went on. They might tell you it's about money or legacy or duty, but it's not. It's about truth, about who keeps it and who buries it. You've always known the difference, Danielle, even when you were small. Even when I didn't say it out loud, I felt my throat tighten. She always knew what I couldn't say. Now she was saying what no one else would. Whatever happens next, she said, firmer now. Don't let them twist it. Don't let them shame you or silence you. What I left behind, I left with full intention. You don't need anyone's permission to stand in your name. You are the legacy. Silence. Then, faintly, almost too soft to catch, she whispered one last line. I loved you the whole time. Click. The file ended. The room was silent again, but nothing felt still. Everything in me was vibrating. Not with rage, not even grief, with purpose. They'd spent months, maybe years, trying to make me doubt I belonged. But she hadn't, and now I had proof. Of what exactly, I wasn't entirely sure. But I knew one thing, this wasn't over, not even close. The next morning, I wore black again. Not for mourning this time, but for clarity. There was something surgical about it. Clean lines, tied hair, no jewelry, just the folder tucked neatly into my bag and the flash drive in my pocket like a sealed weapon. I didn't call ahead, didn't need an invitation. My Uncle Raymond's office sat above the insurance firm he owned downtown. the same building where he'd smiled through estate meetings and retirement parties for 2 decades. He was the polite one, the one who never raised his voice, never got involved, the one who just wanted peace in the family. But he'd known. I knew it now. I could see the outlines of silence drawn around his name in the margins of my grandmother's letters. Not complicit, maybe, but compliant, and that was enough. I walked in without knocking. He looked up from his desk, startled. "Danielle?" I closed the door behind me. "Got a minute?" He rose halfway, gesturing awkwardly toward a chair. "Of course, I didn't expect." "You knew she changed the will," I said. No wind-up, no throat clearing. He blinked, his mouth opened, closed, then he sank back into his chair. I wasn't sure it was final," he said cautiously. "Your mother said," she said I'd cut off contact, that I wanted nothing, that I didn't deserve to be part of this family. He didn't argue, didn't deny. I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it on the desk between us. "That's the final will, notarized, witnessed, James confirmed everything." He stared at it like it might detonate. I kept going. "She named me executor. She left the cabin to me. She knew what they'd try to do and put it in writing. She even left a message." His brow furrowed. "A message?" I pulled out the flash drive and laid it beside the folder. "She recorded it herself. You can listen, or I can have it played in court." That got his attention. He sat forward, tension finally breaking across his shoulders. "Danielle, it's complicated. My mother lied," I said sharply. "She submitted an old version of the will and pretended the rest didn't exist. She barred me from the funeral. She locked me out of everything." His mouth moved, searching for a word soft enough to cover betrayal. I didn't give him the chance. "You didn't stop her," I added. "You watched." He flinched, and that was the moment I knew. His guilt was real, but it was old, worn smooth like something he'd been polishing down for months, maybe years. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said weakly. "It already did." Silence stretched between us. Then he exhaled, slow and shaking. "What do you want from me?" I leaned forward. "I want the truth acknowledged, publicly. I want my grandmother's wishes restored. I want every version of that will that was circulated, retracted. I want every family member who's been told otherwise, corrected." His lips parted, a weak protest forming. "And if I don't?" he asked, low. I didn't raise my voice. "I'll file a petition of probate fraud, serve everyone involved, and let a judge handle the rest." He looked at the folder again, then at the flash drive, and finally at me. His smile cracked first. It wasn't enough to corner them in offices. They had built this lie in public, at pews, on prayer cards, over sympathy casseroles, and now it had to unravel in front of the same eyes. So I made calls. Aunt Barbara, Cousin Tessa, even Matthew, who barely looked me in the eye at the service. I told them there was something they needed to see, and I told them where. I didn't wait for confirmations. I just reserved the back room at the church where the wake had been. Same chairs, same carpet, different truth. They came, not all, but enough. 10 faces. Familiar, filtered through age and filtered loyalty. They sat with folded hands, polite expressions, unsure what to expect, or what version of me would speak. My mother arrived last. She walked in without hesitation, like she owned the space. Like her presence alone was enough to remind everyone who had been organizing funerals while I'd been missing. She didn't greet me, didn't look at me, just took her seat and crossed her legs like she was waiting for a school board meeting to begin. I stepped forward and held up the folder. "This," I said, "is Grandma's final will." Several heads lifted. "I found it in her locked cabinet, behind a key she hid only for me. I confirmed it with her lawyer. I've got notarizations, dates, and a recording of her voice confirming everything." No reaction from my mother, but I could see the tension bloom in her knuckles. "She made me executor, not you," I said. "She left me the cabin. She trusted me to handle the estate, not because I asked, but because I never did." Aunt Barbara shifted uncomfortably. "She recorded a message," I added, "in her voice, for me. And in it, she confirmed she knew what might happen, that someone might try to bury her intentions alongside her name." I saw it then, the flicker. Not guilt, not shame, but fear. My mother's face didn't fall, it hardened. "You're twisting things," she said evenly. "You misunderstood. We were trying to protect her legacy." I turned to the others. "She barred me from the funeral," I said, voice steady. "She told people I didn't care, that I cut contact, but I have letters, documents. Voice recordings, and every single lie they told is unraveling. My mother rose. You're turning this into a spectacle. I met her eyes. No, you did, the moment you forged a version of the truth and dressed it in black. She opened her mouth to retaliate. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. If anyone here wants to hear her voice, come find me after this meeting. I won't play it aloud unless you ask. I placed it gently on the table. No theatrics, no shouting, just evidence, the kind that didn't blink. Behind me, murmurs. Tessa leaned forward. Barbara looked pale. Matthew stared at the floor. My mother didn't move. She stood there, stiff and wordless, like a statue built of decisions she could no longer defend. And for the first time in my life, I watched her shrink. Not disappear, just diminish. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't linger after the meeting. I walked out the way I came, spine straight, hands empty, truth trailing behind me like smoke from a fire finally fed. I didn't look back at my mother. She had made her choice the day she told me I wasn't family. Now she could live with the silence I left in return. The drive back to the cabin felt different this time. Not like retreat, but return. The sky had shifted. Clouds hung low and heavy, as if even the weather was waiting for a final word. The door creaked open like it remembered me. Inside, everything was still, exactly as I'd left it, but the stillness was charged now, like something hadn't quite surfaced. I wandered into the kitchen, then back to the old reading room. The floor creaked under my weight, the same creak I used to hear when Grandma would pace during long phone calls. Her voice low, steady, threaded with the kind of worry she never said aloud. I stopped mid-step. That sound. Right there, not a squeak, a hollow. I stepped back, pressed my heel again. Hollow. A narrow board near the window. I dropped to my knees, fingers trembling slightly now, not with fear, but with something sharper. Expectation. I slid the rug aside. The board wasn't nailed, just settled in place. One good tug, and it lifted clean. Beneath it, in the shallow space, was a tin container wrapped in an old tea towel. I recognized the pattern, yellow roses and blue lines. One of Grandma's favorites. Inside, a letter, sealed. My name on the front. Just my name. Not pumpkin, not sweet girl, just Danielle printed in firm block letters like it needed to be unmistakable. I sat down right there on the floor and opened it. Her handwriting was slower now, wobblier, but clear. Danielle, if you're reading this, then you've already done more than most would have dared. You've found the truth. You've heard my voice. But you haven't heard everything. There were things I couldn't put in the will, things I couldn't speak into a recording. I needed them to be found, not told. You are not only the one I trusted, you are the one I raised to finish what I could not. Look inside the photo album in the bedroom closet. The red one. The truth isn't just in papers and recordings, it's in faces and dates and what's missing between the smiles. My hands shook, not from fear, from realization. This wasn't over. She hadn't just left me evidence. She left me a map of people, of moments, of the final thread that would pull everything loose. I pressed the letter to my chest, eyes closed. Grandma hadn't just left me a cabin, she'd left me the job of finishing her story, and I wasn't done yet. The closet in the bedroom hadn't been touched. It still smelled faintly of cedar and rosewater, the way her clothes used to. The red album sat upright on the top shelf, wedged between a box of tax papers and an old scarf I gave her in high school. It looked innocent, but my hands hesitated, because I already knew this wasn't about pictures. This was a story, and she had hidden it here for a reason. I pulled the album down and walked it back to the desk, cleared the space with one sweep and laid it flat like I was bracing for surgery. It opened without resistance. Page 1, birthdays, smiles. Me at 5 years old holding a balloon shaped like a whale. Page 2, Christmas, matching pajamas. Someone's thumb in front of the lens. I smiled bitterly. Then page 4, I stopped because the tone shifted. The paper was older, yellowed at the edges, and the faces weren't posed anymore. They were captured, caught mid-motion, blurry, as if taken in secret. There were notes in the margins, names, dates, but one name came up again and again. In pencil, underlined twice, Gloria, my mother, sometimes circled, sometimes with arrows, once with the word Y scribbled beside it. Then the pictures changed again. A small cottage I didn't recognize, a man I'd never seen. He looked familiar, but not from memory, from resemblance. Sharp jaw, blue eyes, my eyes. There was no caption beneath his photo, just a tear in the corner where someone had tried to pull it loose and failed. I flipped the page and froze. A birth certificate, not mine, but someone else's, female. Date of birth, 2 years before me. Parents, Gloria Mitchell, and unknown. My heart stopped. There was a sticky note beside it. Grandma's writing. I wasn't supposed to know, but I did. She made me promise never to tell. But you deserve to know who came first. I scanned the lines again. A sister? No, not quite. Not the way they'd always told it, because I wasn't the first. She was. Hidden, forgotten, erased. And suddenly it made sense. The unevenness, the tension, the way my mother looked at me not with contempt, but calculation. She hadn't hated me. She had managed me. Because the family lie had started before I was even born, and I'd been walking across the cover-up my entire life. I flipped faster now. More pages, newspaper clippings, a social worker's name. Letters, blacked out, redacted, but left here nonetheless. Until the last page. A photo of Grandma and me. I was maybe 8. We were on the porch at the cabin. She was holding me like the world was ending. And maybe, for her, it had already started. There was one final note taped beneath the image. You know what they buried. Now you know why. The rest is yours to choose. I sat back, not crying, not shaking, just still, because the truth wasn't heavy. It was sharp, and I had just picked it up. I didn't sleep. The album sat beside me all night on the couch, pages open like wounds finally scabbed over, but never forgotten. By morning, I wasn't confused anymore. I was ready. The name on the birth certificate haunted me, the blank space beside father, the silence Grandma had carried, the erased existence of a child who came before me and somehow vanished without a trace. I needed to find her. And I started where anyone would, the county clerk's office. The woman behind the glass was older, brisk, but kind. I slid the information under the slot without preamble. Full name, date of birth, and an old address scribbled from the edge of a photo in the red album. She typed, frowned, typed again, then leaned closer to the screen. Strange, she muttered. What? I asked. No formal records after 2001, she said. No marriage, no taxes, no school transfers, just nothing. Can I get a copy of the birth certificate? Normally I'd say no, she said, but it's flagged. Flagged? She nodded slowly. Marked as amended, usually that means a name change or sealed adoption. My chest went cold. Someone had tried to wipe her out legally, just like they had emotionally. Can I get the original copy? I pressed. She hesitated, then slipped me a card. Try this place, she whispered. Off the books. Might have what you're looking for. It was a tiny community center 30 miles outside town. A dusty archive full of adoption records, private files, and social worker logs from before everything went digital. No sign, no clerk, just a door buzzer and a receptionist who barely glanced at me before unlocking the inner office. The archivist was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with ink-stained fingers and headphones around his neck. You're looking for closed files? He asked. Yes, a girl born to Gloria Mitchell, March 1994. He blinked, then whistled low. That's deep vault territory. I have this. I showed him the scan from the album. It was buried. He read the note, the handwriting. That's old school, he said, and serious. He disappeared into a back room. 15 minutes later, he returned, a slim folder in hand. She was placed, he said. Privately, under pressure, no agency. Where? He opened the file. Midwest, he said, to a couple in Ohio. No siblings. Clean adoption, but there's a note. He pointed. Scrawled on a yellowing form were 5 words. Mother refused to hold child. I swallowed hard. She never even looked at her? I asked. He shook his head. No, but the grandmother did, twice, before the transfer. I closed my eyes. Of course she had. Grandma Eleanor had seen her, named her maybe, and carried that memory alone for 30 years, until now. Do you have her name? He hesitated. She changed it after turning 18. Then how do I find her? He pointed to a second page, a mailing address, 2 years old. Nothing confirmed, but something real, something traceable. I walked out into the wind, gripping the folder like it was a newborn truth, because now I wasn't chasing a secret. I was chasing someone who might have every missing piece. And maybe, just maybe, she was waiting for me too. It was a beige house on a quiet street, 2 steps up, Wind chimes shaped like stars, a ceramic frog by the mailbox. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed, here lies the key to your entire identity. But as I stepped out of the car, the weight in my chest deepened. The air felt thick. I'd come alone. No folder, no lawyer, no letters. Just the name, the address, and everything I didn't know how to feel yet. I rang the bell. It took a few seconds. Then the door opened, and I saw her. My age, maybe a little older. A scar just above her left eyebrow, same place I'd split mine falling off a bike when I was 9. Blue eyes, same exact shade. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her mouth parted, like she was about to ask if I was real. I stepped back slightly, voice thin. Were you born March 12th, 1994? She nodded slowly. And your mother was Gloria? Another nod, then a pause. She looked at me hard, like she was watching a memory she didn't know she had. I always thought maybe, she said quietly. But I didn't know who to ask. I'm Danielle, I said. She exhaled, and something inside her face crumbled, not in fear, but in recognition. She stepped back. Come in. Her name was Mariah now, raised by teachers in Ohio, moved twice, no siblings. She'd always known she was adopted, but the story had been blank beyond the papers. No photos, no explanations, no one ever answering why there were no medical histories, no family trees. I asked once when I was 15, she said, handing me tea we barely touched. My mom said the birth mother was in distress and had her own reasons. Did you try to find her? I started, she admitted. But I got scared. What if she didn't want me? What if she was awful? She is, I said, and we both laughed. Sharp, short, bitter, then quiet again. I told her what I knew. Not everything, not yet, just the pieces that mattered. The birth certificate, the erased will, the red album, the fact that Grandma had seen her before the adoption went through. Mariah's eyes filled. She saw me? I nodded. She remembered you, enough to leave a trail, to make sure I'd find you. She wiped her cheek, and then something changed. She reached for a drawer and pulled out a picture. It was folded, faded. It showed a woman in a floral dress holding a baby at the edge of a hospital bed. That's not your adoptive mom, I said. No, she whispered. That's the woman who dropped me off. My hands went cold because that wasn't my mother. But I knew that dress, that bracelet, that look. It was my grandmother. She held you, I said. Not just once, she stayed, long enough to make sure you were safe. And then we both sat there, two strangers who weren't strangers at all, holding pieces of a story neither of us had asked for. But now, we were holding it together. We drove back to the cabin in silence. Not the heavy kind, not the angry, unfinished kind. This was the silence you share when the noise has finally fallen away, when there's nothing left to scream and everything left to feel. Mariah sat beside me, eyes scanning the trees. She hadn't stopped touching the photo, not clutching it, but resting her fingers lightly against it like it might dissolve if she let go. I pulled up the gravel path, and the cabin welcomed us like it always had, like it was waiting, for both of us now. Inside, nothing had moved. But everything felt different. We went to the red album first. Mariah turned the pages slowly, pausing at every photo with Grandma in it, her fingers brushing across faces she'd never seen before. And then I remembered something. The guest room, I said. She used to keep old stationery in there. When I was little, she'd write letters by hand, always on blue paper. We rushed down the hall, opened the drawer in the old writing desk. Empty. But when I tilted the bottom panel, something shifted. A false back. I slid it loose. There, folded, wrapped in twine, sealed in a faded blue envelope, was a single sheet. Our names in soft, flowing script. Danielle and Mariah's breath hitched. I opened it slowly, laying the paper flat between us. Her handwriting, still strong, still unmistakable. My girls, if you are reading this together, then you have already done what I prayed for. You found each other. You weren't supposed to be apart. None of this was supposed to happen the way it did. But I was scared, I was pressured, and I didn't fight hard enough back then. But I see you now. I've seen you both, even if only one of you grew up close to me. Danielle, I left you everything not because of blood, but because of what you carried when no one helped you. You walked through silence and still chose love. Mariah, I held you the day you left. I sang to you even though no one wanted me to. I've missed you every day since. You were never a mistake. You were a beginning. I want this cabin to be for you both. Not just in paper, in presence, in spirit. I want it filled with laughter again, with your voices, with the family no one else thought possible. Forgive me, not for loving you, but for not protecting that love better when it mattered. Make it yours now. The last line was underlined. Make it yours now. We sat there for a long time, the letter between us, the red album beside it, the storm outside just beginning to whisper through the trees. Not angry, not tragic, just real. Mariah looked at me and smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but full. I think I want to stay here a while, she said. Me too, I whispered, because the fire was gone, but what remained was stronger. Inheritance had always been the wrong word. This wasn't about what was given, it was about what was built, together.